Have you ever wondered if the story you were taught in history class was the whole truth? Let's talk about 1929, the year of the Great Crash. The official narrative paints a picture of roaring 20s excess, speculative fever, and an unfortunate but natural market correction that spiraled out of control. But what if that's not the full story? What if the crash wasn't an accident but a meticulously planned event? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on one of the most significant events of the 20th century. We'll explore a different perspective, one that suggests the 1929 stock market crash was a deliberate act. A controlled demolition of the American economy designed to reshape society and concentrate power in the hands of a select few. This isn't just about a single day in history. It's about the foundation of the financial world we live in today. To understand what happened, we need to look at the years leading up to the crash. The 1920s weren't just roaring, they were fueled. But fueled by what? A massive expansion of credit made possible by the newly formed Federal Reserve. In the mid-20s, the Fed kept interest rates low, making it incredibly cheap for banks and individuals to borrow money. This flood of easy money poured into the stock market, creating a massive speculative bubble. Stock prices detached from their actual value, soaring to dizzying heights. It felt like a party that would never end, and everyone was invited. People were borrowing money to buy stocks, a practice known as buying on margin. It was a house of cards, built on a foundation of debt. Now, here's where the story takes a turn. While the public was caught up in the frenzy, certain key figures in finance were quietly exiting the market, cashing out at the peak. Then, in 1929, the music stopped. The Federal Reserve, the same institution that had fueled the boom, began to tighten its monetary policy. They raised interest rates, making credit more expensive and sucking money out of the system. This was the pin that pricked the bubble. With credit drying up, margin calls began. Brokers demanded investors pay back their loans, forcing them to sell their stocks at any price. The selling turned into a panic, and the panic turned into a full-blown crash. On Black Tuesday, October 29, 1929, the market collapsed, wiping out fortunes overnight. This wasn't just a market correction, it was a cataclysm. The ensuing Great Depression was a period of immense hardship. Millions lost their jobs, their homes, and their savings. But amidst the widespread suffering, something else was happening. An unprecedented consolidation of wealth and power, as businesses failed and properties were foreclosed upon. Those who had cash, the same individuals who had exited the market before the crash, were able to buy up assets. From corporations to real estate, for pennies on the dollar, the wealth of the nation was being transferred from the many to the few. The Depression provided the perfect cover for a massive power grab. But the most profound change wasn't just about who owned what. It was about fundamentally altering the nature of money itself. The real goal, according to this perspective, was to sever the final link between money and a tangible asset, gold. Before this era, the US was on a gold standard, meaning every dollar was backed by and redeemable for a specific amount of gold. This placed a natural limit on how much money could be created. It disciplined the government and the banks. The Great Depression was used as the justification to dismantle this system. In 1933, the government made it illegal for private citizens to own gold, forcing them to turn it in for paper currency. This act effectively moved America, and eventually the world, off the gold standard and onto a fiat debt-based system. What does that mean? It means our money is no longer backed by a physical commodity, but by government decree, and crucially, by debt. For every dollar that exists, there is a corresponding debt. This new system gave central banks the unlimited power to create money out of thin air, a power they simply didn't have under a gold standard. We were moved from a system of savings and real value to a system of perpetual debt and inflation. This is the financial structure we live in today, a system where governments and central banks can inflate the money supply at will, devaluing your savings and pushing you further into debt just to maintain your standard of living. From mortgages to credit cards to student loans, debt is the engine of our modern economy. It's a system that incentivizes borrowing and penalizes saving. This shift, which began in the chaos of the 1930s, represents a fundamental change in our relationship with money, work, and freedom. Now, why is this history from nearly a century ago so important today? Because the patterns are eerily familiar. Look at the financial landscape of the 21st century. We've seen central banks create unprecedented bubbles through years of near-zero interest rates and quantitative easing, flooding the markets with easy money. You see asset prices, stocks, real estate soaring to levels disconnected from economic reality. We hear the same promises of endless prosperity, just as they did in the Roaring '20s. And we are seeing the beginnings of a monetary tightening cycle, with rising interest rates that threaten to pop these bubbles. The narrative we are given today is that these actions are necessary to manage the economy or fight inflation. But it's worth asking, is history repeating itself? Are we witnessing another controlled demolition designed to usher in a new financial system? A system perhaps of central bank digital currencies, where they have even more control over our money and our lives. The story of 1929 is not just a history lesson, it's a cautionary tale. It teaches us to be critical of official narratives, to understand the mechanics of money, and to recognize the patterns of boom and bust that have been used to consolidate power. They presented a certain story then, and they are presenting a certain story now. It's up to each of us to look deeper and draw our own conclusions. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into a different side of history. If this perspective resonated with you, and you want to explore more topics that challenge the mainstream narrative, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss our future content. Stay curious and question everything.